Ukraine. But first, I want to tell you about my week at CPAC. See, late last week, I traveled to Washington, D.C., a.k.a. the armpit of America, to attend CPAC, otherwise known as the Conservative Political Action Conference. I've attended and have spoken at this event for the past few years, and I often broadcast from Radio Row. I kind of like the opportunity to get the politicians right in the crosshairs of my mic and ask them about questions, and they can't run away because A, there are hot mics all around them, and B, cameras are everywhere, meaning they know they're going to look like fools if they try to run away. It is a smorgasbord of media. I gave an interview to a dude from Agence France Presse who asked me if politicians make themselves available to the media here because it's friendly territory. I pointed out that, I couldn't answer your question accurately because it's a supposition. Maybe, I asked, he could ask if the media first was friendly territory at all before predicating the conclusion on an answer that's assumed. He tried and did as I asked, finally. I answered that actually, no, the media isn't as friendly here. Just because it's at CPAC doesn't mean that they're going to be automatically super friendly. You don't gain credibility by softballing it. I've had several interviews get pretty contentious, but there's not any need to be contentious for contentious sake, though. I do wonder, however, if that reporter would have asked that of the media assembled at Netroots, the leftist version of CPAC. The big breakout speeches came from Rick Perry and Rand Paul. Perry's speech was designed and delivered like a comeback speech after a really unfortunate turn during the 2012 primary fight. 2 weeks before he began campaigning, Perry decided to have back surgery. Probably wasn't the best timing, and instead of telling the story of Texas, Perry ended up having to make up lost ground for forgetting that third thing that he would cut from government. His speech was fiery, and it was very well received. Whatever your opinion of Perry, the presidential candidate, this is the guy that people should have heard during the 2012 election cycle. Take a listen.
It is time for Washington to focus on the few things the Constitution establishes as the federal government's role. Defend our country, provide a cogent foreign policy, and what the heck, deliver the mail, preferably on time and on Saturdays.
There you go right there. See, Rand Paul quoted Pink Floyd, and he received a long-standing ovation with this line.
If you have a cell phone, you are under surveillance. I believe what you do on your cell phone is none of their damn business.
Can I get an amen? Paul ended up winning the CPAC straw poll, too, which everybody always talks about, but it's not so much of an indicator as to who's actually going to be the front runner in the general election. It's more symptomatic of who can bring the bigger street team. One potential politician not only had a street team, but his fans even had a booth. Dr. Ben Carson, who has appeared on this program, has before said that he doesn't desire elected office, but he'll run if he's got to. This is where it gets kind of difficult, though. See, most of the time I say things that people like to hear, but sometimes I don't. For the record, now, Scripture doesn't tell you what you want to hear all the time either, but rather what you need to hear. I found out that for a few people, anyway, this is one of those times they just didn't want to hear it. Here's the thing. I don't care if somebody's held an elected position for. We have it in our head somehow that the only people fit to run are those bred to run, which then turns elected office into some kind of industry instead of a service, a sacrifice. Did you know, by the way, that 5 doctors signed the Declaration of Independence? A smart individual, somebody educated, university educated or an autodidact, somebody with common sense, preferably a private sector business background, even better if they're a veteran, and basic simple respect for the Constitution. This is all it takes. The Constitution, that's the litmus test. I began talking about this 6 months ago, right after Dr. Carson's interview with Glenn. I was a Carson fan until this interview. And don't misunderstand me, I still like him, just not for elected office. See, those founders who signed the Declaration of Independence, they would have never supported a compromise of any of our precious civil liberties, not the way that Dr. Carson suggested during his Q&A with Glenn. Listen.
Do I have a right to own a semi-automatic weapon?
It depends on where you live. I think if you live in the midst of a lot of people, and I'm afraid that semi-automatic weapon is going to fall into the hands of a crazy person, I would rather you not have it. If you live out in the country somewhere by yourself, I have no problem.
I get it. I do. A lot of people like Ben Carson. I've interviewed him before myself, but his belief in this restriction of gun rights based on geography, that's a deal killer for me. I've had so many people say to me over the past couple of days, Dana, you can't judge a candidate on just one issue, or Dana, you cannot have a litmus test. Hold up. This isn't an issue. Our right to keep and bear arms isn't an issue. This isn't the same thing as invoking a vote on cloture, the debt ceiling, the budget, immigration. This isn't an issue. This is a civil liberty. And yes, a stance on the civil liberty should be a litmus test. This isn't a privilege under law. It is a liberty, a privilege free from law, the government and its bastardization of the law to curtail your liberty. Repeat with me. The Second Amendment isn't an issue. It is a civil liberty, and there are no compromises on civil liberty, folks. Now, would Dr. Carson's remark be more or less unacceptable if he had said that your First Amendment civil liberty, your speech, if that should be restricted by your geography, if your freedom to assemble should be restricted by your geography, if your freedom to report on the government, the freedom of the press, if that should be restricted on geography? No? Then why should it be any different with the very civil liberty that protects all the rest? Folks, we got to be fierce when it comes to the protection of our civil liberties. I've had people say, but Dana, this is just his belief. He didn't give any indication of acting upon this. So wait, you want to get him into elected office and then play wait and see? You trust politicians that much? Because I sure as hell don't. Hey, did people trust or not trust John Roberts at one point? Didn't Reagan trust Sandra Day O'Connor? No, there's no such thing as trust between a people and their elected representation. It is a contract of fear, or at least it should be. Do what you're elected to do, buddy, or we'll vote you right back to the backwaters from whence you came. Yes, an abridgment of a civil liberty is big enough to cancel out a campaign. I always dislike it when politicians, elected or potential politicians, are lionized before a wider audience learns about all of their positions. People did this with Paul Ryan, too, and he voted for TARP. He supported bailouts. They did this with him right when he was tapped to join Romney on the trail. And we don't need a political savior. People, we're conservatives. We're individuals. We don't need an icon. But if people are hell-bent on having one, I get it, Marketing 101, we have to have better choices. We do. But none of them have shown themselves yet, in my humble opinion. Now, while I was at Radio Row, I met a man about whom I wanted to learn more. His name's Matt Bevin. I've heard this guy's name dragged through the mud by all of the right Republicans, so I figured, if he's ticking off these folks, I got to meet him. He's challenging Mitch McConnell for the Republican Party nomination in the Kentucky Senate race. Really, either he or McConnell, both of them have a shot at defeating the dynasty that comes with the name Lundgren and Allison Lundgren Grimes. I was at dinner with a friend who was telling me that if you wanted a bell, an American-made bell, either for your church, your school, whatever, there's only one person that can make you an American-made bell, and here in the United States, and that's Matt Bevin. His family are bell makers. In fact, they're the last ones here in the country. He's got 9 kids, he homeschools, he's got grassroots support, he's got common sense, and he respects the Constitution. So I wanted to learn more, and I invite you to come along with me. But first, the interviews you may have missed from Radio Row. Today on The Dana Show, we're broadcasting live from CPAC 2014 in Washington, D.C. Joining me right now, though, Senator Mike Lee. Good afternoon to you.
Hello.
37 modifications to a law that was passed in 2009 and isn't expected now to be fully implemented until 2016, of course, Obamacare. Isn't that, Senator, a complete admittance that the law's a failure?
Well, yes, I think it is. It's an admission of the fact that it's a failure and that he knows that there will be political accountability for that failure if he allows the law to be implemented as it's written.
Right.
And so that's why it's no coincidence that he's suspending a lot of these things until after certain critical election cycles have completed themselves.
Right.
And that's even more evidence of how bad this is, how nefarious it is.
Last quick question for you. I know you got a split. Statisticians say that the Senate is going to flip 2016 to Republican favor, largely in part because of people like you. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think that Ronald Reagan was right when he said we're better off when we paint in bold colors. We don't want pastels. When we paint in bold colors, meaning when we draw a clear distinction between what conservatives stand for and what liberals stand for. We win elections. That's what we need to continue to do. Grassroots conservatism, constitutional conservatism is at the heart of that, and we've got to push that forward.
Former Senator Fred Thompson, you're still involved in politics. I read your Twitter stream. I think you're quite witty on Twitter. You mastered the 140 characters.
I like to give the president the benefit of my thoughts on how he's performing from time to time, but he's making the case for federalism like I never could. I mean, this arrogation of power and one centralized authority, derogation of states' responsibilities, all those chickens are coming home to roost now, and I hope people will not forget about the Founding Fathers' ideas about the way this country was supposed to be established.
What do you have in the pipeline? What are you working on now?
Well, we're here talking about a movie that we just did called Persecuted.
Yes.
And it's a good, solid conservative film, and it's about church and state. It's about the federal government and impinging on First Amendment rights and what happens when that takes place. I go against type a little bit, play a priest. I wish you wouldn't laugh like that. But in the movie, Daniel Loesch here is the director, and check it out.
Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, come on over. Last week, we marked the 5th anniversary of the Tea Party movement.
Right.
I cannot believe how far we have come, and in that time, we've, I think, infused Congress with a lot of limited government, strong constitutional conservatives, and you created the Tea Party caucus in the House. What are your thoughts now, 5 years on this movement?
Well, I think that we should all celebrate and rejoice, because remember, 5 years ago, the left issued an obituary over the Tea Party. They didn't think we would survive for 6 months, but we are real, authentic people who still have stayed true to the cause.
Right.
And we believe something very simple. Number one, we're taxed enough already. Number two, government, don't spend more money than what you take in. Number three, follow the dictates of the Constitution.
Are you optimistic?
It'll be a miracle. I believe in miracles. It'll be a miracle, but we can do it if we stay in the hunt. We can do it. We do have to unify. And as much as I love purity tests, we have to wrap our arms around people if they agree with us 80% of the time.
Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, we so appreciate your voice, your defense. Thank you.
Well, you're an awesome mom and a beautiful lady. Thank you.
Thanks so much.